Cal tema frapo. This is part 2 of the NATVI grammar overview series. This video is all about nouns, and the next video will be all about verbs. These two videos combined will teach you all the basics about how to make sentences in NATVI. Before we start talking about nouns, let's make sure we know what a noun is. Both in English and in NATVI, you can divide words into classes. We have nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs, particles, and so on. Arguably, the most important word classes are nouns and verbs. The difference between these two is the role they fulfill in the sentence. A noun refers to a physical or abstract thing. A verb, on the other hand, tells you what action is going on. It tells you how the nouns in a sentence are related. For example, in the sentence, two warriors hunt a bird. The nouns are warriors and bird, and the verb is hunt. NATVI has nouns, like English, and just like English distinguishes between the singular I and the plural I's, NATVI has a plural as well. However, instead of just one plural form, NATVI has three: the dual, the trial, and the general plural. These are for 2 objects, 3 objects, and more than 3 objects, respectively. It is important to use the correct plural form. The general plural of nari is ainari. If I tell a NATVI that my dog has ainari, they'll get a mental image of a dog with at least 4 eyes. So instead of using the general plural, ainari, you'd want to use menari instead. That's the dual form, meaning 2 eyes. Now, let's see how we make these forms. To do that, you simply place me, pe, or I in front of the word after applying a process called lenition. Okay, before continuing to talk about plurals, we'll take a step back and talk about lenition, because understanding lenition is essential to understanding how the plural forms work. If you ask a linguist, lenition means changing a consonant to make it sound softer. This happens in several real-world languages, and NATVI does it too. In NATVI, lenition always affects the first consonant of a word. If the word starts with a vowel instead, lenition cannot take place. Let's look at the list of consonants from last video. Lenition affects the consonants in the first 3 rows of this table. The 3 ejectives become stops. Pa becomes pa. Ta becomes ta. Ka becomes ka. The stops and affricates become fricatives. Pa becomes fa. Ta and sa become sa. Ka becomes ha. And a, the glottal stop, disappears altogether. One exception: the glottal stop doesn't disappear if it's followed by a pseudovowel. This is because, as we have seen in the last video, a syllable cannot begin with a pseudovowel. So, if we'd apply lenition in this case, we'd end up with an impossible syllable. Now, let's go back to the plural forms. To make the dual, trial, and general plural, you first apply lenition to the word. And then you place the plural prefix me, pe, or I in front of it. If something triggers lenition, we indicate this with the plus sign. So, we'll write me, pe, and I with plus signs. This is just to help you remember the lenition. You don't actually write the plus sign when you're writing in NATVI normally. Let's look at some examples of plural forms. Weon becomes me weon, pe weon, I weon. When you add a plural prefix to a noun, the stress stays on the syllable where it was originally. So the correct pronunciation is me weon, not me weon or me weon. The same applies to the other prefixes we will learn about today. Kariu becomes me hariu, pe hariu, I hariu. U becomes meu, peu, aiu. Ulngo becomes me ulngo, pe ulngo, ai ulngo. Now a special case. Eltu becomes meltu, peltu, aieltu. You would probably expect meeltu and peeltu there, but Natvi really doesn't like long vowels, so the two sounds collapse into one. Elan loses his glottal stop after lenition, and then similarly becomes melan, pelan, aielan. Because the general plural, I, is used really often, there's a way to shorten it. Namely, if the word was affected by lenition, you can just drop the I. So, you can say hariu instead of I hariu, and eilan instead of aielan. This way, the lenition on its own shows the plural. This short plural is optional. You can use it for all words affected by lenition except for the word u. Now that we know everything there is to know about plurals, let's move on to another class of prefixes, the determiners. These indicate, broadly, what the noun is referring to. In English, determiners are separate words that you place in front of the noun. For example, the articles a and the demonstratives this and that, and words like every, any, some, and so on. Natvi doesn't have articles. Instead of a bird or the bird, you just say bird. In Natvi, this, that, and every are not separate words. Instead, they are attached to the noun as prefixes. This and that are expressed with fe and tsa. Fe refers to things that are close to you, while tsa refers to things that are further away. So you could say feyayo or tsayayo. As opposed to the plural prefixes, fe and tsa do not cause lenition. If you use fe on a noun that already starts with e, like ilva, then the two is sounds contract into one. For example, fe ilva becomes filva. Similarly, tsa atokirina becomes tsatokirina. You can use fe and tsa together with the plural prefixes. Fe and I generally combine into phi, and tsa and I always combine into tsai. The lenition caused by the plural prefixes still applies when combining them with fe or tsa. By the way, in this case you cannot drop the I to make a short plural, so fe hariu is not correct for these more than 3 teachers. There are 2 more prefixes that work like fe and tsa. Firstly, fra, meaning every. So, fracariu means every teacher. This can be used together with I, in which case they combine into frai. So, fraihariu means all teachers. Secondly, there is pe, a question prefix meaning which. This prefix triggers lenition, so pehariu means which teacher. It can combine with I into pai, so paihariu means which teachers. Pe is a bit special. As opposed to all other prefixes we've seen so far, it can also come after the noun. In this case, it doesn't cause lenition. Here's an overview of all noun affixes we've seen in this video. There are, in fact, many more. The most important of these are the case endings. These are very connected to how verbs work in Natvi. So, we'll learn about these in the next part of this series, which will be all about verbs. Irayo for watching to the end of this video. Hai alovai!